Does anyone believe that education has all the right opinions and tells you all of what's factual? Perhaps I didn't think so. In this video, I'm going to go over the myths that you may have been taught in school during your childhood. With that being said, I'm going to start off with the myth that's dedicated to the prolonged duration for gum to digest. Teachers in school would tell you that if you swallow gum, whether or not that is avertant, that it would take as much as a whopping 7 years to digest. This sounds like a way for them to discourage you from eating gum, panicking that it's dangerous as such. Let's face it, eating anything that's food can't exactly kill you unless if it's poisonous. So it's not precisely dangerous to swallow gum. Listen to this actual fact. Gum cannot be digested, not even after 7 years, because really, nothing takes even a year to digest. Gum cannot be dissolved into human waste by the body's enzymes or acids. The gum can actually pass through the digestive system very quickly without being digested and later comes out from the other end, but much, much quicker than you think. Also, some studies suggest out there that digestions can take up to 5 days. Perhaps a memory I have from when I was in school was when a teacher in school told me that cracking my fingers will ultimately lead to me having arthritis. I've come to address that while cracking fingers can sound annoying to some people, there's absolutely no scientific proof to support cracking your fingers, knuckles, or any joints to ultimately lead to arthritis. People who crack their fingers are just at a very similar risk of arthritis as those who don't. Perhaps this myth is made up, obviously, by someone who's easily annoyed by the sound of joint cracks. Ever heard a teacher tell you to manage your stress or you'll wind up having gray hair before you're 21? This myth suggests that stress is pretty much the price of melanin, resulting in your hairs graying. Stressing may have impacted your health, but it's not actually a cause of gray hair. Let's be real. Gray hairs are actually caused by aging and genetic factors. People start graying at different rates due to their own genetic factors. If stress were to really cost melanin, then right now the creator of this video, Rainy Kleiner, would end up completely gray and would be absolutely melanin deficient. Has anyone ever made up the 5-second rule, you know, that dedicated to bacteria coming from the floor onto a piece of food? Teachers may have taught you that if you drop your food on the floor, then you had 5 seconds to pick it up before it gets infected with bacteria, but no. If your food falls onto the floor, it'll immediately get infected with bacteria, and eating off the floor can really harm your health. In 1992, the United States Department of Agriculture released the food pyramid. Teachers told their classes to follow said food pyramid for a so-called proper nutritional diet, which of course failed to work out. It was problematic to the blood cholesterol. This was eventually replaced by the 2005 My Pyramid, which only consisted of a stick figure walking up the steps for physical activity instead of foods. In fact, the 1992 food pyramid neglected to emphasize physical activity, which it got bested by the 2005 My Pyramid, but was easier to understand than the 2005 pyramid. Also, the 1992 food pyramid couldn't distinguish in between refined and whole grains. Did anyone ever tell you that George Washington had wooden teeth? Didn't think that was the case. Washington's dentures were actually made of lead, gold, ivory, and metal spring, human and animal teeth instead of wood. The stain on the ivory made it look like the wooden teeth from the perspective. Perhaps that's what's urged this myth to be taught. Also, has anyone ever told you that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492? Well, Christopher Columbus's supposed discovery in 1492 actually had millions of indigenous citizens living in the Americas for thousands of years before then. Viking explorers such as Leif Erikson have reached the North American continent centuries before the supposed discovery of Christopher Columbus. Perhaps the 1492 journey sparked exploration from the Europeans at the time, which they saw their continent and the neighboring continents as the Old World and the Americas as a New World. This also led to the Europeans to colonize the Americas at the time, which was a massive change to the world. If I could remember correctly, raindrops presented in elementary school were portrayed in shape of teardrops, but actually they vary into 3 different sizes in genuine reality. Small drops are in shape of spheres, which isn't as much as a millimeter in size. Medium drops are in shape of a hamburger bun or kidney beans, as they fall faster and get flattened by the air resistance on the bottom of said drop, and large drops are in size of parachutes, which are about up to 5 millimeters in size and are unstable. These drops break into small drops, so there exists no teardrop-shaped raindrops in reality. Teachers in school may have also taught you to respect all adults, especially those in authority. Well, perhaps there is a huge problem with that. If anyone who is to be obeyed and give out commands, they must be reasonable enough to establish a healthy environment. This kind of myth has gotten the demand for respect to emerge in a civilized society, even if they act so tyrannical that the commands make zero sense. In reality, we are not mandated to respect an authoritarian figure, and respect is something to be earned and not demanded. So in which case, not all adults deserve to be in a position where they deserve obedience, especially if one has to be an authoritarian figure who demands respect from people despite the tyranny. What would we do with 90% of our brains if we only use 10% of our brains for anything? You may have been taught that we use 10% of our brains when, in fact, as proven by neurological research, our entire brains are active. The brain's entirety consists of mental potential. Brains are active, and it's more than just thought that's used by the brain. Have you ever been told that you have 5 senses? According to De Anima, also known as On the Soul by Aristotle and Robert Drew Hicks, we have 5 senses, which are sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Neuroscientists and philosophers recognize the senses of balance, body awareness, temperature, pain, and time. That all on top of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Aware that blood is always red? Blood doesn't actually change colors at all. It's a common misconception to think that deoxygenated blood is blue in color and once exposed to oxygen that it turns red. Perhaps the veins, if any, look bluish or greenish under the layers of skin. Human blood contains hemoglobin, which is so much iron that gets oxygen from the lungs and brings the oxygen to the body's tissues back and forth. Hemoglobin is red, so therefore blood is never blue and always red, whether exposed to oxygen or not. If any animals with blue blood, it's snails, spiders, cephalopods, and crustaceans, for examples, as their blood molecule is hemocyanin instead of hemoglobin. If you ever been taught that Abraham Lincoln personally freed the slaves and believe it to this day, think again. For one obvious point, there were only a dozen amendments ratified under the U.S. Constitution instead of a complete baker's dozen at the time that John Wilkes Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln. The 13th Amendment on the U.S. Constitution was ratified on December 6, 1865, dedicated to the abolition of slavery, which took effect during the presidency of Andrew Johnson, who was Lincoln's running mate from 1864 during the election, as well as his vice president while Lincoln was incumbent, which he was until April 15, 1865, when he died from Wilkes Booth's gunshot wound. No dead person would be able to do anything such as freeing the slaves, since dead people can't do anything at all. It's true that Lincoln opposed slavery and wanted it abolished, but it's not true that Lincoln achieved freeing the slaves. Remember how Abraham Lincoln issued the executive order on January 1st, 1863 called the Emancipation Proclamation, which allowed black men to join the Union Army and granted freedom for the enslaved within the boundaries of the rebelling states. This executive order didn't solely end and abolish slavery altogether. If you ever catch a cold, it's usually during the winter season when people spend most of their times indoors, making it more liable for you to catch those airborne viruses that can be contagious. It's not true that being cold ultimately leads to catching a cold. Cold weather does cause conditions to increase the liability to catch cold viruses. Dried air oftentimes accompanies the cold weather and can cause more trouble for the immune system to fight the cold off. Finally, one last mention. The biggest myth of all time that you were taught in school, that is the belief of having a diploma aligning with success in life, especially upon graduation. It's a common misconception to believe that a high school diploma is the ultimate key to success to quote-unquote shield you from the potential and most liable hardships that come around upon graduation. It's a common myth for teachers to believe that doing well in school will also mean doing well in adult life, when in fact, In school, you're just basically learning about facts instead of actual life skills that are the path to success in life. They seem much unaware of the factors of success outside of the box, such as creativity, skill, critical thinking, and social intelligence for building relationships. People can be successful regardless of the education level, as I provided success factors that are outside of school. I find it funny how teachers in school guarantee to you that if you don't get a diploma, you don't get a good job, when in fact, success is not solely about education levels. Let's have a look at Colonel Sanders, for example, who dropped out of school during his 7th grade year to work on a farm. This may be true that the middle school dropout faced numerous hardships throughout his adult life, but it actually wasn't because of dropping out of school, but it's actually since he lost his father at a really early age and dropped out of school at 12 years old to support his widowed mother and siblings. It may be true that by the age of 17 he had lost 4 jobs, not because of his education level, but it's actually because he fought with a coworker on the railway, he engaged himself into a courtroom fight with a client, and was insubordinate as an insurance salesman, as far as we've known. If a high school diploma was actually required to be successful in adult life, then KFC would have never existed, as the middle school dropout eventually became a successful multi-billionaire from his sole proprietorship of KFC in spite of his education level. Has any teacher or principal from your school told you that your permanent records will follow you everywhere in life? That's also not the case. Let's reference a clip from the Simpsons episode, The Grade School Confidential, where Edna pulls out Bart's permanent record and tells him that the supposed impact on his adult life.
As you know, Bart, your permanent record will one day disqualify you from all but the hottest and noisiest jobs.
This part of the script suggests that with a long discipline record or something like that gets followed by a heavy restriction of career choices in his supposed windblown future. Discipline is a very important and crucial aspect worth shaping up an individual. Did you know that we do have doctors in real life who have been disciplined in school at the extent that the stereotype would be disproven? Didn't think so. Let's be real. Going to college doesn't mean you'll be more successful upon graduation than anyone who only has a high school diploma. Think about how people fail in life. Even if you have multiple PhDs, you still aren't shielded from any hardships in life. There is more than just simply complying with educational principles in order to be successful in life. So whatever the deal is, I think that it's important to guarantee that an individual must think of ways to be successful if he or she doesn't receive a high school diploma for flunking courses. Telling students that they won't get a good job if they don't graduate isn't a good guarantee to make, as that guarantee on multiple occasions has been disproven. Anyways, that's all I have for the myths that you may have heard back in school, especially those aforesaid myths that sound absolutely illegitimate beyond words. If you have anything else to add to the aforementioned myths or have any more myths from school that could have been mentioned throughout this video, please leave a comment as I'll personally be reading them. Also, I will personally release 2 new sub-series that are kind of similar to the Incompetent Narcissist and the Delusional Snowflake sub-series on my Instagram. They will be The Biased Teacher and The Successful Snoot, satirically depicting someone who believes academic stereotypes to be true and authentic in the Biased Teacher sub-series, and The Successful Snoot to satirically depict someone in general who is high class and looks down on lower class citizens just simply for being more successful than them. A resemblance of Squilliam Fancy Son, to be for sure. They will be related to each other by marriage, husband and wife, and I will release the premiere as soon as I can. Perhaps the titling will be similar to that of Miss Teacher's trivia show, and the plots might be different from The Incompetent Narcissist and The Delusional Snowflake. Anyways, for more content on the Master Rainey channel, be sure to hit subscribe and ring the bell for the notification for the 89th video of the Master Rainey channel when it comes out. Until then, this is Master Rainey now signing off. Have a great rest of your day.